I only checked it after the first period. I didn't look at it after that. But after the first period, when McDavid and Draisaitl were on the ice together at 5-on-5, Florida outscored them 5-1.
Stunning.
Like, who thought that was going to happen in this series? Like, Florida, they figure out what you're good at and they take it away from you. Because they're great players who are disciplined at doing it. That is their gift. They make you think, oh, they beat us, we weren't that good. Well, maybe you weren't that good, but you know why you weren't that good? Because they won't let you be good. You know, the Oilers, I know everybody's hurt, and I know they're really disappointed, and McDavid sure looked angry. You know, they've been to the final 2 years in a row. That's a really hard thing to do. And they mowed down the rest of the Western Conference. Like, I know this sucks and it's a horrible feeling, but don't over-exaggerate or don't go crazy. They got beat by a powerhouse. Now, they're going to have to decide what they're going to do in goal. Now, in the regular season, they felt very strongly that what was available to them at the prices that were available to them, it wasn't worth it. Now you go into the off season and you have to decide, how do we feel about that? Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Their depth was a huge factor in the playoffs, and then in the final, they didn't have enough support for the big guys. All of a sudden, that went dry. You know, Kane had a tremendous playoffs, and he took a bunch of penalties in the final that basically ended his effectiveness. Nugent Hopkins, like, we'll see what it was, but the talk is, I think we can say it now, it was a broken finger or hand or wrist or something like that. So that ends his effectiveness. Hyman was out. So immediately you lose Hyman. Nugent Hopkins is at limited effectiveness. Kane sort of penalizes himself out of the series. That's three key players from the playoffs that were suddenly not on your team, right? And you need that depth. So I'm sure the Oilers are going to look at, okay, how much do we have to reconfigure here? What are we going to look at? They have one more year of McDavid on this contract. But you're going to have to think about their questions in goal. And the other thing too is, you know, they had a real good group going on their defense, and then all of a sudden Ekholm comes back, and he's a great player, like just a great player. But their defense was kind of screwed up a little bit after that. It's weird. I find it very hard to explain. You can't tell me that Ekholm coming back is a negative, but it did somehow screw around with their group. And we'll see how that figures itself out. Like, the goal that they gave up, Marchand on the faceoff in Game 5, where he beat him at center ice, another defenseman in the league told me that he couldn't believe, in retrospect, that Ekholm was on the right side there. He's a lefty shot. He doesn't play the right side as often. He's coming back from an injury. Said that even as player as good as Ekholm is really going to have a hard time making that play, and he turned the wrong way. And I was thinking that on the play where he got beat on the first goal by Reinhart in Game 6, again, he was on the right side, and he got beaten going to the middle of the ice. Like, the whole thing is just weird. I don't really know how to say it, how to explain it. But Edmonton's D played really well for most of the playoffs. I think the biggest questions they're going to have, Kyle, is number one going to be in goal, and number two, you know, what do they think of their forward mix? We know that Frederick is getting extended. He's signing a long-term deal at a lower AAV there in Edmonton. I think Bouchard gets extended. Yes, he had a really rough Game 6. That was a tough pass, the first goal, but he did have the turnover at the blue line late in the first period. But for the most part, he had a phenomenal playoff, and I think he's going to be extended at a very big number. But also there's a McDavid extension to worry about, and I'll have some thoughts about that probably on Friday when we do our next pod. But I think the biggest question Edmonton has are, one, how do they feel in goal? And number two, what are they going to do with their forwards?
It's a lot to think about for the Oilers for sure. Stuart Skinner, Calvin Pickard, both with 1 year left on their deal as it currently stands. And, well, Pickard, of course, and Stuart now as well, Skinner, will be UFAs at the conclusion of those deals. You know, we talked a lot about going into this series, and certainly early on was the McDavid Barkov matchup, Elliotte. I think, I know the panel talked about it. Luke Gazdick in the post-game show with Ken and Ivanka did a great highlight pack on it all. The real matchup of McDavid versus Gustav Forsling was just an unbelievable job by Forsling, where, I mean, how many times, just in Game 6 alone, where it wasn't you're completely wrapping McDavid up, but you're just getting enough of a piece to disrupt what he is trying to do. And you mentioned the frustration that McDavid had in the postgame. The one line that stuck out to me was, we kept trying the same thing over and over again, banging our heads against the wall. Now, I don't know if that's just, as we say, the frustration, the anger of the way it all ended for him and the Oilers again this year, or if there is a little more to that. I don't know if you caught that at all in the aftermath.
I didn't. You know, I was out.
Yes, you were busy,
guys. So I'll have to look at it more.
Yes,
I just heard he was really upset, really angry. Like, you could see how angry he was.
Because you know why it struck me, because, and why I just, all right, we'll let the dust settle a little bit here and see if there's anything deeper to what he said about that. But do you remember the famous Daniel Alfredson quote when he was still playing for Ottawa?
Which one was that one?
So in the 2013 playoff second round, they're up against Pittsburgh. They lose Game 4 at home to go down 3-1, and Sylvain St. Laurent, who of course now part of the PR staff with Ottawa, was still a reporter at the time, and he asks Alfredson in the room post-game, you know, is it feasible to think you can beat the Penguins 3 games in a row now? And Alfie says probably not, and of course that catches on like wildfire. And someone told me the genesis behind that comment was because early on in that series, he was pleading with Paul McLean, who was then the head coach, was that whatever the Penguins were doing to them in the neutral zone was killing them.